Welcome back to Fear the Dark, where everything in your nightmares becomes a reality on this Halloween night. Hold on and brace yourself for 4 terrifying true Halloween tales. Allow me to give you a treat and have a listen as to how these unfortunate souls got tricked. Shush by George's Gorge 1977. Halloween had finally come, and my friend Amanda and I couldn't be more excited. We'd been best friends since kindergarten, and every year our mothers dressed us up in the same costumes, and so it carried on right up till this year, which was our first in high school. This year we decided to be broken dolls. We had gone and bought the same baby doll white dresses and broken doll masks from our local Walmart. Amanda had the idea that we wouldn't talk to each other as that'd make her look so much more creepy. After school, Amanda went home to change and I did the same. We were going to meet back at my place at 6 to head out trick-or-treating. About 5:30 I got a FaceTime request from Amanda. I answered and there she was, in her broken doll mask and dress. She even went so far as to put fake blood splatter all over her white baby doll dress. So I in turn did the same. She didn't say a word, just put her finger over her mask as to tell me, shh. The FaceTime ended, and I got a text that said, see you soon. About 10 after 6 I heard my doorbell ring, which was strange as Amanda usually just came in, as I did at her house. When I opened the door I heard, trick or treat. There stood a Buzz Lightyear and a Cinderella with 2 smiling parents. I held out the bowl and the 2 small children took candy and said thank you. As they turned to leave, I looked down my sidewalk and seen Amanda at the end, standing there staring at my house. I left the bowl on the stoop, locked my door, and pulled my mask down across my face. Amanda and I stood side by side and started walking down the street. Everyone we passed told us how awesome our costumes were and how creepy they were. We stuck to our rule and we never said a word. Amanda was acting strange though. She would only go up to certain houses, and at one point she pushed Mike, a kid we knew in grade 8, after he'd fallen. Amanda took his bag of candy and threw it over a fence, and then she stood there staring at him. It was then I noticed her eyes. Amanda had blue eyes just like mine, but for some reason they were dark brown beneath her mask. I asked her if she'd gotten contacts for her costume, and she just nodded, yes. As we trick-or-treated, there was other things I noticed also. She seemed a lot skinnier than usual, and she smelled terrible. Her shoes weren't the ones we picked out for our costumes either. I asked her if she was okay, and she turned and looked at me, and nodded, yes. We kept walking the streets. We've known since we were kids, when my phone started to ring. I checked it and an unknown number came up. I didn't answer and placed my phone back in my bag that I had for candy. When I looked up, Amanda had stopped and was staring across a field at the mental asylum. I looked across the field also and seen they had the spotlights on. There was at least 50 people out in the fenced-in yard, being chased by men and women in white hospital gear. I made a joke about how they had the best Halloween decorations this year. Amanda turned and looked at me and held her finger to her mask again, shushing me. I told her she didn't have to take this so seriously. She looked deeply through the slits in her mask, where the eyes were, and her head tilted to the side. I could tell she was upset with me, so I apologized, and we continued on. I told her after this street I was going to head home as I was cold. My phone rang 3 or 4 more times with that unknown number, but I never answered. We'd started heading back to my house and walked past the backside of the asylum. There were 2 large men standing at the fence in patient uniforms. As we walked past, one of them started screaming, an ungodly scream, the kind that makes your skin crawl. He was pointing at us. Amanda stopped and shushed him, the same way she did me. He instantly stopped screaming. Both of the men started heading back to the main building. It was about 20 minutes back to my house by foot, and I was happy about that, as I was freezing. Amanda, on the other hand, looked as if she had steam coming off of her skin. When we got back to my house, there were 2 police cruisers out front, and my parents were talking to a cop. My mum was in tears, and my father looked really mad. Amanda took off into the woods across from my house, and I could only assume it was for pushing Mike earlier. I walked up and my mum grabbed me and asked where Amanda was. I asked her if she was in trouble. She said, "No honey, just tell me where she is." I told her she ran into the woods because she pushed Mike earlier and was afraid she was in trouble. The cop that was near my parents said something into his radio, and 3 of them ran into the woods. It was then my mother and father took me in the house and asked me to sit down at the table. I sat and took off my mask, and my mother asked how long I'd been with Amanda tonight. I said she got here around 6, so the last 2 hours. There was a knock at the door and my father got up to go answer it. He opened the door and a policeman was standing there. He said something to my father and my father became pale white. He shook the police officer's hand and locked the door, deadbolt and chain. He told my mother to ensure all doors and windows were locked, and then he armed the security system he had installed. While they were running around, my phone rang with a text message. I opened it and seen it was from Amanda. It was a video, but it was really dark and grainy. I pushed play and it showed a single cop walking through the woods. Amanda walked out behind him with a large knife in her hand. Sneaking up on him, she slid the knife across his throat, and he fell to the ground, gasping for air. Then she walked back to her phone and did that same head tilt thing, shushing me again. Then the video ended. I screamed and my mother came running in. She watched the video and vomited into the kitchen sink. My father came in and called 911 after watching the video. They finally got around to tell me what was happening. Amanda and her family had been killed earlier, just after Amanda arrived home from school. The calls I had been receiving were from a police officer. The 40-year-old woman who had been trick-or-treating with me was an escapee from the asylum and had been held there since she was a teenager for killing her family. She had cut out her tongue so as to not talk about her problems and hadn't said a word since. The worst part is, they still haven't caught her. It's almost Christmas and every once in a while I'll get a text from Amanda's phone with the same outfit and mask on from Halloween. She'll have more blood smears on her dress or her mask. But she always ends the video by holding up her fingers to her mouth, shushing me. And here to help me narrate the next 2 scary stories is my spooky friend, Mr. Shadow. If you like his narration, be sure to subscribe to his channel. There will be a link in my description down below. But don't worry, I'll be back to tell you your last terrifying true Halloween tale. Welcome to the Halloween Horrors Tattoo Parlor by Sleepy Hollow 101. Narrated by Mr. Shadow.
You've heard of pop-up bars, but have you ever heard of pop-up tattoo parlors? Yeah, me neither. I guess I just assumed that those couldn't exist. For, I don't know, legal reasons? How would you turn a profit doing something like that anyway? It's safe to say that I was very curious when one showed up in my neighborhood last year. There was a sign out front proudly proclaiming, "Welcome to Halloween Horrors Tattoo Parlor, open only for a limited time." I took a picture and posted it in a Facebook group for local tattoo enthusiasts. Some people were dubious. Isn't it kind of sketchy that they opened it in an abandoned Starbucks? But others were excited, already making plans to visit. I wavered for a while, but in the end I found myself walking into the parlor 2 weeks before Halloween. I told myself it was just to see what the fuss was about, and if I happened to see something that I liked, well, I had money burning a hole in my pocket. The store was dedicated to their theme, I'll give them that much. As soon as I walked through the door, I was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of cobwebs, spiders, bats, and blood. Chains hung from the ceiling, there was a coffin leaning against the wall, and there was some seriously creepy music playing over the loudspeaker. Welcome to Halloween Horror's Tattoo Parlor. My name is Tiffy. How can I help you? I almost jumped out of my skin. I hadn't even seen her when I walked in. She was standing behind the counter, an amused smile on her face like she hadn't actually been trying to give me the fright of my life. She must have come up to the front while my back was turned. Hi. I saw your shop a few days ago and I thought I'd come in and check it out. Of course. She beckoned me over to the counter. I can show you some of my work if you like. I took her up on it, paging through a binder of impressive tattoos. I know quality work when I see it, and this woman absolutely knew what she was doing. After I'd looked through most of the book, I found my gaze wandering to focus on her instead. She was petite, a good foot shorter than I was, with long blonde hair that was pulled back into a ponytail. Her green eyes were intense under the black liner and eyeshadow. Her lips were the same shade. She wore a ripped black Susie and the Banshees tank over a fishnet undershirt, a pair of black skinny jeans, and chunky black combat boots. She was absolutely stunning. The tattoos covering her arms, neck, and chest only added to her beauty. I couldn't see most of them clearly, but the ones I managed to glimpse impressed me with their quality and creativity. I wondered how many she did to herself, and who did the rest. See anything you like? She asked, seemingly oblivious to my staring. I looked back down at the binder, leafing through the pages. To tell the truth, I saw a lot of some things I liked, but one stuck out to me. How about this? I said. She looked where I was pointing, then gave me a half smile. Excellent choice. I think this will look great on you. How much will it cost? She tilted her head and considered me for a moment. How about I give you this one, free of charge? I couldn't possibly. Sure you could, she winked at me, and I felt my heart stutter in my chest. But don't tell anyone. I only do this for the really cute clients. This really is my day, I thought to myself as she led me to the back. It felt like it took her no time at all to finish, cleaning up her tools while I admired the sinister jack-o'-lantern on my left wrist. It was absolutely perfect. I couldn't wait to show it off to my friends. She and I chatted a little more as she walked me back to the front of the store. I left my number with her and she promised to call. With a wink and a little nudge, she had me out the front door into the crisp October air. Several other people in the town visited the Halloween Horror's Tattoo Parlor. Most of them posted pictures to the Facebook page, myself included. Alexa got an excruciatingly realistic vampire bite tattooed on the side of her neck. Ethan got a snake on his upper arm. Sam chose a little green bottle of poison on her hip. Eventually, even the skeptics had to admit that Tiffy did good work. More and more people started heading to her shop. I thought about stopping by, since she hadn't given me a call since my session, but I didn't want to be weird. Besides, surely she was busy with all her clients. I didn't think about her much over the next few days. At least, I tried not to. It was a week before Halloween that things started to get weird. The trouble started with Alexa. Or, more specifically, the news report that came out about Alexa's death. She'd been found in her apartment. I guess her parents hadn't been able to get a hold of her and had called the police for a wellness check. They found her dead on the floor. The cause of death wasn't immediately obvious, but the autopsy revealed that she'd been completely drained of blood. The curious thing was that she had no wounds on her body, not even the smallest cut. The only clue the police had were a few drops of blood found on the floor near her neck. Everyone was baffled. The police had wanted an investigation, but there didn't appear to be any leads. Everyone liked Alexa. Nobody would have wanted to kill her. It was bizarre, to be sure, the kind of thing people would be talking about for years. In fact, it was sure to be the talk of the town for the next several months at least. That was, until Sam died. Just 2 days after Alexa, she collapsed at work. Her colleagues said she'd been feeling a little ill all morning, complaining of nausea and a headache. By the time lunch rolled around, she was unconscious. Before the workday was over, she was pronounced dead at the hospital. Official cause of death? Arsenic poisoning. The Facebook group discussed their deaths a bit, because wasn't it strange that both of them died just after receiving new tattoos? Not that there was any connection, of course. I mean, how could there be? I remember reading about people arguing about possible explanations, distracted only by the unbearable itching on my stomach. It had started a day before. At first it was just a touch irritating. I figured I'd gotten a few bug bites or something and just hadn't noticed. But by this time, it was almost painful. There was no rash, no obvious bites, nothing to indicate something was wrong, other than that ever-present gnawing itch. A few days later, the day before Halloween, 2 things happened. First, I went to see the doctor, who assured me the itching was all in my head and there was nothing physically wrong with me. Second, Ethan died in a bar downtown. The patron said he just stood up and started screaming, his body caving in on itself. And judging by the state of the body, it really seemed like they were telling the truth. He was crushed. Completely crushed. The bartender swore he caught it all on camera. Now everyone was starting to freak out. Was it something supernatural? The work of a serial killer? That didn't make any sense. Well, neither does blaming it on unknown superhuman forces. Maybe voodoo? Do you even know what voodoo is? The arguments went on and on and on, their intensities fueled by fear. I shut off my computer for the night, ignored the texts on my phones from friends who wanted to gossip about the latest tragedy, and went to bed. I woke up just as the clock turned midnight to a terrible, searing pain in my abdomen. It felt like I was being gored from the inside out. The itching made way for a violent tearing. I could actually hear my skin being ripped apart. Feel the hot blood cascading down my sides in a sticky torrent. Oh my goodness, I'm dying, I thought as I reached for the phone next to my bed, trying to remain conscious and ward off the encroaching shock as I dialed 911. The conversation is something of a blur. I told them my address and tried to explain what I was feeling. The pain got somehow worse and I was screaming. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, up to an IV drip, my torso wrapped in bandages. That's not good. I wasn't panicking just yet, probably because of the mind-numbing painkillers I was on, but I was curious, so I started pulling at the bandages. They came off slowly, like they were reluctant to show me what was underneath. Eventually, I freed myself from the last of the bandages and stared down at what had happened to my skin. There, carved in the flesh of my abdomen, was a grinning jack-o'-lantern, its expression exactly the same as the one on my arm. They were able to stitch me up before I bled out, but they couldn't stop the scarring. It's something I have to live with. Every time I take my shirt off or look in the mirror after a shower, I see it staring at me, mocking me. Sometimes I wish I'd died, just so I wouldn't have to see it anymore. When the police asked me who assaulted me, I told them the truth. Nobody. No one at all was in the room with me. It felt like it was coming out from inside me. I can't explain how or why. But when I told them about Tiffy, the Halloween Horror's tattoo parlor, all of us had gotten a tattoo there, and all of us had suffered unspeakable horrors in the aftermath. They didn't believe me at first, but as other people turned up dead or maimed, all of them with only one commonality, the police became a little more open-minded. But by then, it was too late. Tiffy was gone, and so was her shop. She vanished without a trace. There's no mention of her online aside from those old Facebook posts. I felt crazy, wondering if she'd existed at all. Maybe she was some weird mass hallucination. But how else could we explain all the horrible things that had happened because of her? Maybe there is no explaining it. That's what I've come to believe. I moved away a few months after the incident. I know it's stupid, but I just didn't feel safe in that town. I needed to start fresh, so I did. I won't lie, things have been hard, but they're slowly getting better. Slowly. Very slowly, but surely. And I got to thinking that one day I might actually be okay. That wasn't until this morning, because as I was walking downtown on my way to work, I saw a very familiar sign hanging over a new shop. And there, in the window, was a very familiar face, smirking at me with her black lipstick. She winked a green eye and waved. I've never run so fast in my life. I think it might be time for me to move again.
Every Halloween, I get the same trick-or-treater by Color Blindness, narrated by Mr. Shadow.
I can see him now standing across the road toward my living room window. He stands approximately 4 feet and 7 inches tall, from what I can tell. The average for a boy his age. My estimate for that is he's either 9 or 10, but I have no way of knowing for sure. This is because his costume, if you can really call it that. It's a draped bedsheet, tattered and messy, on the edges with splintering tears and unevenly cut holes across his face and upper chest. In some ways, it reminds me of a caricature representation of an old Peanut special, and for this reason, I've come to call the boy Charlie. Charlie and I have made an unspoken agreement over these past 3 years. I don't bother him, and he never bothers me. This is because of what happened that very first Halloween after I moved in. I had never intended to be up so late, but my friend Matt invited me to a party, and that was the type you simply couldn't say no to. I left my house around 9:30 that night, the usual crowd of trick-or-treaters already having made their way by, and that's when I noticed him in my rearview mirror. He was holding an empty plastic jack-o'-lantern and staring straight at me as I prepared to back out. I remember feeling startled. It was unusual to see anyone out at this time of night, let alone a child. So I put my car in park and jumped out to scold him. "What do you think you're doing? Your parents must be worried sick. What's your name?" I asked as I wagged my finger at him from across the street. The boy said nothing. He simply continued to stand there, clutching his plastic candy carrier and looking toward me. I remember that made me feel even more uncomfortable, but also a little frustrated. "Don't ignore me, young man. I'm talking to you," I shouted as I crossed over to get a better look at him. I reached down to grab his arm and pull him over to my driveway. My plan was to call his parents, get them to discipline him, and possibly give him a heart-to-heart. None of that happened. Instead, the moment I touched Charlie, I could not move. I don't mean to say that he was strong or that he pulled away from me. What I'm describing is utter and total loss of any bodily function. I was paralyzed, frozen. I released my grip from the boy immediately and stared down at my sweaty palm. I felt dizzy, confused, and out of breath as I took a few steps back. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a prank? Could it be that the boy was carrying rocks in his shoes and couldn't move? I got closer to inspect his clothes. In the light of the street lamps, I couldn't make out much, so I chose to crouch down. He was wearing long Levi denim jeans under the bed sheet, which ended in some kind of mess of mud and stains on his bare ankles. But no socks or any shoes, just naked feet, which seemed to be covered in dirt and grime. Getting back up to my feet, I placed my hands on my hips and tried again to intimidate him. "What's your name, son?" He made no reply at all. "Look, if you don't cooperate with me, I'm going to have to call the police, and that's that," I said firmly. The air was still. It didn't seem like my words meant much of anything to him. Just to show I was making good on my threat, I whipped out my smartphone. The way he just continued to gaze as I unlocked it and showed I was getting ready to dial made me nervous. "I'm not bluffing," I told him. Not even a whimper of frustration from the boy. I dialed, not because I needed to make him comply, but mostly out of concern. Something wasn't right here, and the authorities needed to be notified. I went back to my car to grab my purse after talking to a patrol officer, and then messaged Matt to tell him I would be running late. After about 10 excruciating minutes of the boy staring at me, I spotted the police cruiser at the end of the street. Gently, they pulled up to my curb and rolled down the driver's side window. A young officer nodded toward me and asked, "What seems to be the problem, miss?" I almost laughed. "The problem is this kid. He's been out here for almost an hour now. It's not normal." The officer looked at his partner, then both of them stared over at the boy. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. "Nothing to be concerned about, ma'am. Go about your business," the first cop finally said. I think my jaw actually dropped. "What do you mean there's nothing to be concerned with? He needs help. Isn't there a loitering ordinance you should enforce, or a curfew?" I insisted. "Curfew is 10:30, ma'am, and only on school nights. You ain't hurting nobody," the second officer declared. They offered me a card to call back if there's any other issue and drove off nonchalantly. I looked up toward the trick-or-treater in frustration and marched back over to him. "This isn't funny anymore," I said, but my voice no longer had any sort of commanding tone to it. It was quivering and anxious. I didn't want to even touch him again, but I forced myself to do so. The same electrifying sensation flowed across my body. It felt like time itself was standing still. I couldn't tell you how long I was there, just holding his arm. But after what seemed like an eternity, I finally heard him speak. It wasn't out loud, though. It was this, deep resonation into the farthest crevices of my mind. "Walk away," it said firmly. It was a cold voice, not the voice of a child, not even really of a human. No, this was the type of voice I think the devil must have. Or perhaps something even far older. It was old, ancient, and evil, and it made every fiber of my being feel a sense of hopelessness and emptiness. I let go of him and rushed back to my car. I couldn't get over the fact that this felt very, very wrong, so I called Matt up and begged him to come to my house, to do something to make this kid leave. I don't remember much about that hour other than the sensation of dread slowly creeping up my body. I didn't feel safe anywhere. I thought about going inside, locking the door, and waiting for Matt, but it felt strange to hide from a child. It felt even stranger to be standing there, only 10 feet from him, and realizing I felt powerless. Was this even a child, or was this something much older, much stronger, and far more deadly? These thoughts circled my mind like sharks in a pool of blood. I no longer felt comfortable talking to the boy, nor did I want to make eye contact. I just wanted him to leave. Matt got there right around 11. His face was a mixture of concern and frustration. I really thought you were joking, he told me as he got out of his sports car and walked towards the boy. So, what's going on, champ? He asked, smiling at my visitor. The trick-or-treater, as expected, said nothing. Come on, buddy, let's go home, Matt decided, and prepared to tug on his arm. I knew what was going to happen, but I still felt like I was watching a train wreck in slow motion. Matt became instantly rigid, the way a person might if he were to be encased in cement. His face looked pale and full of shock, his hair standing on its end. Then he jerked back and nearly stumbled into the road. His features had the look of death. Matt got up, brushed his pants off, and started walking toward his car. I don't need to be here. You don't need me. Just leave the kid alone, he said. He started his engine and I gripped the side of his car door. Where are you going? I asked. He stared at me with a frantic look in his eye and repeated his warning. He sounded out each word slowly and purposefully. Leave the kid alone. Then he drove off. When it was just me alone with the trick-or-treater again, that sick churn in my stomach returned. I finally convinced myself to go inside. I remembered staying in the living room, though, peeking out the windows and waiting for something to happen. I remained fixated on the boy, my eyes drooping and my weariness overwhelming me. Finally, sleep overcame me. The next morning, the boy was gone. No trace of him even remained. Not even the dirt that I had seen surrounding him on the sidewalk. It was as if he was never there. I tried to call Matt to get his viewpoint on the whole ordeal, but he didn't pick up. The drive to his apartment revealed he was gone. His roommate hadn't heard from him. A few short hours later, I found no one had. He, like the trick-or-treater, had vanished. I went down to file a police report the day after. Something told me it was important I do it for the boy too, but nothing ever came of it. Somehow I found a way to return to normal life. I forced myself to, really. It almost worked. I was almost free. Until the next year, when the boy returned. When I saw him appear this time, there was no doubt. I knew I was dealing with a specter of some kind. That only made my anxiety worse. The whole night, I couldn't leave my house. I was certain that if I did, something would go wrong. He would cause something to go wrong. Somewhere after midnight, I tried to get a grip of my sanity, become courageous. Maybe it was the drinks I had to calm my nerves. Either way, I convinced myself that I could go confront this apparition and make them leave. I approached with a drunken swagger, nervous and fidgety. The boy didn't seem to care, so I knelt down to get on his eye level, searching for any sign of his eyes or facial features. In the streetlights, I could see nothing, not even the reflection from his pupils. It's possible he may not even have them. I imagined staring into a faceless boy and it made me shake physically. I lost my courage then and went home to sob in bed. I dared not try again that night. Experiencing something like this not once, but twice, makes you reevaluate things in your life. Reconsider what is and what isn't important. I've never really thought about having kids, not even as a little girl. My mother raised me and my two siblings alone, and I guess I always equated children as being a hardship more than a blessing. Over the next year, as the months crept by, I found myself often thinking about the boy. The one I now have come to call Charlie. What was his story? Was he a ghost? If so, why? My mind conjured up a narrative that involved abusive, neglecting parents. The kind that didn't have time to take their son trick-or-treating. Or perhaps they dismissed the practice as something better suited for a boy half his age. In my dreams, I would see Charlie become angry and storm off to bed, shouting to his parents that he hated them. Then, when he knew they were asleep, slowly he would make his way out the back door. Having no money for a costume, or parents that cared to craft him one, Charlie did the deed for himself. He took an old bedsheet and a rusty pair of scissors and headed off into the night with likely only a pocket full of change to purchase a plastic jack-o'-lantern. From there, the dreams are murky. Something happened to him, but I don't know what. Was he struck by a car? Taken? I don't know. But this year I decided to find out. Yes, I'm breaking our agreement. Likely you will believe this is because of some curiosity, and you're likely right. I've also begun to believe that Charlie is my responsibility somehow. I expect one of two things will likely occur. Neither is exactly pleasant. The first scenario involves me attempting to talk to the spirit that I believe is holding Charlie hostage. The ancient dark force that has chosen to have him appear on my street every Halloween. I don't know if such a being can be reasoned with, or if it even understands human concepts, but I will show it that I have some form of empathy and understanding for Charlie. I'll tell the spirit I want to help. I'll even offer to take its place, so that Charlie may go free back to his family. This way, at least the spirit will feel they're getting something out of the deal. But again, I cannot say with any degree of certainty this will work, which is why I'm leaning more towards my second option. This involves talking to Charlie directly and apologizing to him. It won't be easy. Going near him still makes me nervous and queasy. The aura surrounding him is strong. But I want him to know that what's happened is not his fault. I don't blame him for any mental anguish he has caused to me, nor do I hold him accountable for what happened to Matt. He's a child. He's innocent in this. All I want him to know is that it'll be okay. That might be a lie, seeing as how I don't know what the outcome will be. I believe it will go one of two ways based on these methods. Either the creature will see reason and allow Charlie to return to this world or pass on to the next, or he'll continue to hold Charlie as prisoner. There's only one thing I can be certain of. I'm gonna walk out of my house and be with him. I'm gonna tell Charlie everything he needs to hear, and I'm gonna take his hand. And this time, I'm not going to let go. It's likely I may never be able to. I'm okay with that. At least Charlie will no longer be alone.
Thank you, Mr. Shadow, for helping me narrate in tonight's Halloween special. If you've liked Mr. Shadow's narration, don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel. Every Night is Halloween by Opinionated IMO. To his dismay, the storm cellar doors were wide open again. He didn't remember opening them, but there they were, propped open as big as day. There wasn't anyone else around who could have done it. He was alone in the big old farmhouse on the outskirts of town. As much as he didn't want to accept it, Harold realized he was getting forgetful in his old age. Hopefully no wild animals took advantage of the opportunity for shelter and ran down into the closed-off basement, he worried. They'd be trapped there once the doors were closed again. The possibility of that happening was quite reasonable. It had been cold the past few mornings. In order to allow any curious critter a chance to escape, Harold left them open for a while and went about his morning chores. That afternoon he crept down the rickety steps with a flashlight to make sure it was empty. After shining it around the piles of old furniture and damp keepsakes, he was satisfied it was abandoned. Then he shut the doors tightly and weighed them down with a cinder block. Late that evening, there was an unexpected knock on the door. Harold rose from his easy chair to see who'd come calling so close to darkness. He never had any visitors. When he opened the screen, he was greeted by a startling sight. There was a ghoul, a hobgoblin, and two other frightful creatures on his front porch. Without saying a word, they each held out a silken handkerchief. Harold didn't know what to make of it at first. His heart pounded at the fearful sight of the savage-looking creatures. Then he remembered that it was late October. Halloween, he realised with a grin. It had been so long since any kids had came to his remote farmhouse that he forgot all about the kiddie holiday. Luckily, he happened to have some candy in the pantry. He told the spooky little tykes to wait on the porch and he'd be right back with their treats. He was a little startled to see that they were so anxious for the candy that they came into his house uninvited. They also didn't call out the traditional trick-or-treat greeting. Where were these kids' parents, he wondered. For all they knew, he might be a kidnapper or a pervert. Hopefully they were waiting just down the hill by the mailbox. He gave them each a generous handful of candy, which seemed to satisfy them. Regardless, he didn't receive a single thank you. The candy bandit silently turned and left into the night, leaving him to wonder about the lack of manners in the young generation. About the only thing which impressed him was their costumes. They were amazingly lifelike. Back in his day, he only had a plastic mask with a rubber band. Back inside, he sat down and started reading his newspaper again. He was very confused to see that the date on the byline was October the 29th. He assumed the mailman had delivered an old paper, but his desk calendar confirmed it. It was actually 2 days before Halloween. The visitors to his front porch and their true purpose remained a complete mystery. The next morning, Harold was grieved to see that his storm doors were open again. He immediately thought of the impolite candy extortionists from the night before. The weight of the cinder block should have been too much for them, but clearly it wasn't. Those kids were far too small to remove the block and lift those heavy doors. He ran down the steps to confront the trespassers, whoever they were. Once again, the dark cellar seemed to be free of unauthorized occupants, but there were telltale candy wrapper signs on the floor. The exact same candy he'd given them the previous night. Harold's blood boiled. Either they or their stronger unseen family members were violating the sanctity of his home. He made sure the cellar was vacant again, and then barricaded both doors with a chain through the handles, while the countermanded the necessity of quick access to the cellar in the event of a storm. He wanted to send a clear message to the trespassers. He would not tolerate squatters or vagrants living in his home. Around sundown, Harold heard a loud splintering sound disturb the evening silence. At first he assumed it was a falling limb in the woods behind his home, and thought nothing of it. Less than a minute later, however, there came another knock at his front door. He sprang up and jerked it open, in anticipation of a fiery, still unknown conflict. Regardless, he could hardly believe what he witnessed. The same rogues gallery of spooky munchkins were there, waiting with outstretched handkerchiefs. "Where are your parents?" he demanded. "Do they know about your vandalism and trespassing in my cellar? I guess I'll have to call the police if your parents don't come forward immediately. This isn't a joke." The 4 diminutive guests on the front porch remained utterly silent. Meanwhile, they continued to hold out their goodie bags for more treats. Harold was incensed at their brazen audacity. "How dare you stand there demanding more from me while trespassing in my home?" His face was white with rage. He reached over to pull off the mask of the nearest school, but got a startling shock. It wouldn't come off. As he tugged insistently on the top of the costume to force the child to face him personally, the little devil began to growl at him fiercely. After a half-dozen yanks, it was obvious that it was attached. He let go and grabbed another child's mask, with the same result. The 4 half-pint goblins bared impressive, real fangs as they snarled at him. As soon as he came to terms with the chilling reality of inhuman creatures on his porch, he accepted that while they weren't human, they did like sweets. He excused himself to retrieve the bags of candy before he met up with their unseen parents. It was obvious they were all delving somewhere in the bowels of his storm cellar. He made a mental note to always leave the storm doors unlocked and to pick up more candy at the store. He had to maintain their unspoken truce at all costs. He shuddered at the thought of running out. Apparently, every night was going to be Halloween now. I would just like to again thank Mr. Shadow personally for helping me with tonight's video, and I would like to thank you for watching my Halloween special. I hope I gave you all a good scare. I've been your host, Fear the Dark. If you would like to give me a treat this Halloween, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Comment down below what your favourite story was and more video suggestions. But one more thing before I go. The world is a very dark and mysterious place at night, so remember, fear the dark.